All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to your Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here bring our 2024 Week 9 preview and prediction for a ranked matchup between Notre Dame and Navy. The Midshipmen, a shockingly undefeated team in the thick of the college football playoff berth opportunity. Irish with one loss clinging on to theirs. 13.5-point favorites, 52 to the total. Early on in the afternoon, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC from MetLife in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Again, things started with this Notre Dame offense. Since that loss to NIU, this offense has really kicked in high gear. They played a tough Miami of Ohio defense, put up 28 on them, absolutely ran through opponents like Stanford and Purdue. Louisville, that was a hard-fought defense they played, won that one by a score. And then against Georgia Tech, a very good run defense there. They were able to beat them by a score 31-13. So a bit of a tough schedule for Notre Dame since then, Nick. Certainly formidable opponents that they could lose to if they disappointed. You look at Riley Leonard, 1,182 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Last couple weeks, they've found a little bit more balance. This is a passing attack that has limitations. When it comes to the offensive line, when it comes to Leonard's skill set. They're 124th in FBS and passing plays of 20-plus yards. I certainly feel as if they're underachieving, but this is just going to be the scheme they run with this year under Mike Denbrock. I think he's a great offensive coordinator, and 200-plus yards the last 2 games. Exactly where I think they want to be. And Leonard, of course, we'll talk about what he can do with his legs. This is a great receiving corps, though, I think, in terms of talent. Bo Collins leading the way. Jaden Greathouse. Chris Mitchell only has 11 receptions. He's a highly talented player. Mitchell Evans at tight end is a good weapon as well. Jaden Thomas. They have 7 different guys with 10-plus receptions. So they're certainly dishing it out to a variety of different weapons. They're playing up against the defense, Nick. They don't see, talent like this every day in practice, and that's certainly where the biggest concern may come, is that Notre Dame might be able to have a bit of an onslaught when it comes to throwing the football. But those limitations are still there, so they have to be on point, and they still have to have that balance that we'll get to in a minute. What is your expectations for Notre Dame's passing attack in a game like this? And do you think Leonard can, break out for, maybe a 300-plus yard day?
Notre Dame has turned into the offense that we kind of expected them to look like throughout this season after a slow start where things were quite disappointing for the Fighting Irish as they played themselves back into playoff contention. Riley Leonard has been really good so far this season in terms of getting better throughout each and every week. 66% comp rate, 1,100 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He looks comfortable in the pocket, looks a little more confident standing up there. Of course, the rushing attack is the key point to this offense. And Riley Leonard's been able to use his legs a lot, and they've been able to get a lot out of it. But the offense has been able to use the pass game to complement the running game. 189 yards passing per game now. They're getting a little bit better. 28 attempts per game, I think, is kind of right where they wanted to be. They want to be somewhere near that 30 attempts per game mark, which I think is a solid number for this Notre Dame offense. Obviously, they're a run-first offense based off the weapons they have, but having the pass game that is balanced and complementary, I think, is really solid. Riley Leonard looks good. He's confident in the pocket. After being shaky against A&M and Northern Illinois earlier in the season, he shrugged that off. He's looked a lot better. I've been pleased with the way he's been able to play. We've seen some of those weapons, stepping up, looking a little bit better. Bo Collins, in particular, is one guy who you thought was going to be that top receiver, and he's finally hitting that stride, looking to be that top receiver that Notre Dame needed. I've been pleased with the progression of the passing attack, certainly over the past few weeks. We knew the rushing attack was going to be good, and it has been really solid for this team, but the passing attack rounding into form is a key thing for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, like you said, early on in the season, Leonard really didn't provide much, but since the first 2 games, he's either been putting up yards or touchdowns rushing the ball, a little bit of both in some of these contests. This is a guy who does very good running downhill, almost 220 pounds. Obviously, he's a live runner at the goal line, very good on the read option game, 10 touchdowns this year. A phenomenal duo, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, are going to lead the way. And this is a rushing attack that has faced some tough opposition, but have not folded. Almost 200 yards against Texas A&M. Took them a while, but they finally got going. The aforementioned Miami of Ohio defense, they put up 270 on them. Louisville, it was a bit of a tougher game, 117 rushing, but early on in that contest, they were able to break free and spring some big plays. They were able to put them up on the scoreboard, and then against the Georgia Tech team that's been so good, very underrated, have the Yellow Jackets been against the run, 168 yards and 3 touchdowns in that one. So they've faced tough challenges, Nick, against in the trenches, and they've not folded one bit, which I think is pretty impressive considering this offensive line is certainly still a work in progress.
This is still certainly a patchwork offensive line dealing with some injuries, but I've been happy with the rushing attack, 5.8 yards per carry, 209 per game, and 3.1 touchdowns per game. Very key stat there, over 3 touchdowns per game. Obviously, they like to get their rushing touchdowns in the red zone. This team, if they're in the red zone, it's a sure bet they're going to run the ball, and I think when you have the weapons, Love, Leonard, and Price, that could all run it in for touchdowns, you have a really nice balance there. Leonard has 10, Love and Price have 10 between the two of them. All three of those players averaged 6 yards per carry. Love at 462 on the total yards per the year with 6 per carry and 7 touchdowns, while Riley Leonard has 10 touchdowns and 456, and Jadarian Price is 329 and 3 scores, 6.7 yards per carry for him. Really solid, really impressed with the balance here. Love has a receiving touchdown as well, so he can be a bit of a dual threat at times. He has 15 total receptions this year. Been happy with what he's been able to do in the backfield as well. I like the way this rushing attack has been really strong, and now they're going up against a Navy team where they're going to try and see if they can use the run to their advantage, although Navy is a very physical defense. That's just the style of football they practice over there in Annapolis.
Taking a closer look at this offensive line, true freshman Anthony Knapp, he's been really bad at left tackle. I think he's coming off the best performance of the year, though, against Georgia Tech, and consistency in pass protection has certainly plagued them. The interior is pretty stout, though. Sam Pendleton at left guard, center Pat Coogan, and then another veteran, Rocco Spindler, at right guard. Those guys have been quite sound. And then Emil Wagner has been showing nice consistency at right tackle. The Navy pass rush, they're solid, 15 sacks. They only had one against Memphis, though, which we're going to highlight that game a lot because that's a pretty comparable offense, I guess you could say, in terms of production and talent. Move to the Navy offense now. You already know what they're going to bring to the table. It's going to be a triple option rushing attack, 45 points per game, 274 rushing yards per contest. And start with Blake Horvath, who's been tremendous under center, 621 rushing and 10 scores. He also has 10 passing touchdowns on top of almost 150 yards per game. They're airing out the ball, Nick. They've had 10-plus passing attempts in all but one game this year, and that was when they had 9 against Temple. They're able to throw the football. 10 touchdowns from a Navy quarterback. I don't think I've ever seen that in my lifetime. So for them to be able to have this type of balance on offense where they feel confident rolling him out and throwing it downfield gives a different dimension to Navy because they don't throw it much. That's something that's not going to happen very often. Still only 72 attempts through 6 games this year. But this is something you got to account for because typically in the past you wouldn't, worry as much about discipline when it comes to defending the triple option passing attack. But here it seems like they're going to bring it out more often than not. And it's going to be a very interesting challenge to see how the Irish can adjust.
One of the reasons why schools like Notre Dame have so much success against service academies is because they're typically a one-dimensional offense. Blake Horvath, he's not a one-dimensional player. This is a new-look Navy offense. They finally got themselves a quarterback, a guy that they let develop in their system and turn into a really strong player. He's a junior. He's got some reps behind him in the practice field, and he's comfortable, 1,500 total yards of offense for him so far this season, 63% comp rate on 72 attempts, 10 touchdowns to 1 pick. I agree with you. I can't even think of the last time a Navy quarterback had double-digit touchdowns in October passing-wise. It's a really incredible stat. He continues to pump it out. I think I saw, crazy stats where he's one of the rare quarterbacks that's able to get passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns, multiple passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns per game this season. He's been really good. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns, 7.9 yards per carry, 621 yards, just phenomenal across the board. And the fact that they are able to average 161 yards per game through the air is a really impressive stat for a school like Navy, nearly 2 touchdowns per game through the air as well. Virtually unheard of for a program like this. It's changed this offense, and it's got to give Marcus Freeman's defense a little bit of stress this week while they're doing film, because this is really unheard of, and they got to kind of change up some of the system compared to what they're used to when playing Navy. I don't count on Horvath to have a good day here. He's a really talented player. He's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's got a lot of energy, getting some spotlight, has good energy, good enthusiasm on the sideline. He's a kid that you want to be your leader, a proven leader, a really strong quarterback, good runner, great in the pocket. I like the way he's continuing to develop.
Looking back through Navy's numbers real quick, all the way back to 2016, they had 3 different years of 10 passing touchdowns, and that was the most they've had, and they have 11 already through 6 games, so that's a very impressive mark there. And of course, the top guy they throw to, Eli Heidenrich, 23 receptions, 485 and 5 touchdowns, because usually when you throw these guys the ball, they're wide open, Nick, because these teams aren't prepared for it. And you have Brandon Chapman, that was 177 and 3 scores. So it is a big strike offense when they're able to throw the football. And then you focus more on this rushing attack. They have plenty of different guys they're going to give the ball to. Alex Tegza, 306 and 7 scores for him. The aforementioned Heidenrich, he's the 3rd leading rusher. Chapman as well, right behind him with 170 yards. Dabo Fofana, a veteran here, who's 5th on the team in rushing. He does have 2 touchdowns, though, and he's been one of the featured players for them throughout his career. Back in 2022, he had almost 800 yards, so he doesn't get as much of a role. They have a lot of different guys here that get involved. And when it comes to, operating this offense, you have to have a quarterback who's a quick decision maker, not just, a tweener athlete who can make good plays and, have an arm to throw it downfield when those are available. You have to make correct reads, Nick, especially on fullback dives, the pitch man. This is a very complicated offense to run. It's not easy at all. It's going to be extra difficult with a lot of physical Notre Dame, defenders in your face.
Certainly no joke of an offense. Takes a lot of skill and precision. Really has to be a quarterback that's focused and has his head fully on his shoulders here. I think Hayden Rich is a really talented wide receiver. He has 23 receptions on this year. Chapman, the next highest receiver, has 9. So obviously he's the big target. He's the guy that Horvath wants to throw to. 485, 21.1 yards to grab and 5 scores. Chapman himself is not bad. 177, 19.7 yards per catch and 3 scores, while Nathan Kent and Alex Texa each have a touchdown further down the depth chart. When you look at the rushing attack, right, Texas has been really good for this team, 306 and 7 touchdowns. Chapman, Fofana have been solid as well. Shane Reynolds has been okay in limited appearances as well. Nathan Kent has a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown further down the depth chart. So they got guys. This is an offense that has a bunch of different options here. And when you look at the way they line up, this is something that Notre Dame has not seen really, this type of style of football with an offense that can really throw the ball. Horvath is an ultimate weapon. You really got to spy him at all times. Keep an eye on him, because if he doesn't have an open passing lane, he's going to bolt and take down and really pick up a ton of yards on you. This is certainly a tricky thing. I think it's an underrated level of stress for Marcus Freeman's defense. I don't think people are really looking at this matchup on paper and seeing the potential nightmare that Navy could cause if they're playing at their full strength on offense. This offense, I think, has a nice potential here against this Notre Dame defense.
The biggest issue I have in matchups like this is that the offensive line, they just don't have much size. These guys are all future soldiers, Nick. You have to be in pretty good shape to slim down whenever your football career is over. Everyone's 300 pounds or less. A lot of guys are in the 285, 290-pound range. They're playing up against Notre Dame. It has plenty of depth and size on their defensive line. So even though they've been good up front, they've got a lot of veterans. Connor McMahon at left tackle is probably their best one, and then a good center in Brent Self. This is an offensive line I think might get overwhelmed with what the Irish bring to the table. You think that's a concern?
Yeah, it certainly is a fair point. You can't be 350 and in the Naval Academy running 25 miles and doing all the crazy work that we really overlook and take for granted that our future soldiers at both Army and Navy and Air Force do when they go through their training and work and play football. So obviously the size is certainly an issue, right? Because when you look at some of these big guys that they have on the defensive side of the ball, R.J. Obens, one guy I'm looking at, Howard Cross. These are physical players that could certainly dominate in the trenches. If you're looking for a reason why Notre Dame could run away with this game, if they could just continue to overrun this offensive line and give no running room opportunity for Navy, it could put the Midshipmen in a bit of a trouble. But I think that this will be an opportunity to show that, hey, maybe these guys are a little bit more technically sound than we're giving them credit for. They potentially stand up there and have a strong day.
Now moving to the Notre Dame defense, obviously Benjamin Morrison out for the year is a big loss. Maybe not specifically for this game, but as the season moves on, it certainly will be, allowing 12 points per game. And they've been great against the run. I guess NIU started to kind of grind down on them. That ended up leading to them getting a victory, especially on the final drive. Other than that, though, they've held everybody in check. A&M didn't do much. The opponents since then, solid opponents. Georgia Tech, they're great at running the ball. Louisville has explosiveness. Didn't give up much to them. Held, the Yellow Jackets 64 rushing this past week. This is a great defensive line. You alluded to some of those guys like Howard Cross and R.J. Oben. Cross and Riley Mills on the interior. They've been phenomenal tacklers in the hole. Not a single missed tackle between either of them. 600-plus snaps played this year between the pair. Those guys are as dominant as it gets. And the rotation is still good as well. Guys like Donovan Heinisch, Joshua Burnham, Bryce Young. These guys aren't as efficient or as effective, but this is still a group that is in progress and still learning behind that dominant trio. This defensive line, Nick, against, what they alluded to, the matchup of an undersized O-line, these guys are just going to be playing downhill the entire game, and since they don't miss tackles, the fullback dive might just be taken out of the equation completely.
There may be some issues with the fullback dive this game due to the big men in the middle there with Riley Mills and Howard Cross. Mills, a great tackler on this team. You rattle off the stat there. These guys don't miss tackles. 21 for Mills, 3 sacks for him. Howard Cross, 17 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Lead the team in both categories there. Donovan Heinisch has been good, 12 total tackles plus a pass breakup. R.J. Oben, 10 total tackles. Looking to see a little bit more out of him. Want to see if he can get a little more unleashed coming off the edge in later games. Maybe not particularly this matchup, but in the future matchups, I want to see what he could do coming off the edge. But a little disappointed at times. Joshua Burnham, 9 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. He also had a fumble recovery that he forced, while Bryce Young, a good true freshman who's looked good at times, a rotation, a guy of a high upside in the future, 7 total tackles early on. Happy with his performance so far.
In the middle of this defense was the biggest concern for us, just because outside of Jack Kaiser, who's a veteran and a leader, didn't have much experience, and they've been splendid, and they're going to continue to get better. Maybe an opportunity here to potentially get exposed. Drake Bowen has been great, though. He's also been a highly elite tackler. He's great against the run. Jaden Osbury, he's going to be that number 3 linebacker, gets on the field a good bit. These guys have all been splendid in all regards. And, of course, the aforementioned Jack Kaiser, he's great. He's a good sideline-to-sideline player for them. He's always going to be a tone setter. And, you talk about having to be sound up front, not missing tackles. Nick, same thing goes for these linebackers. They got to be in position. They got to be able to make plays sideline to sideline. Trust their eyes, their instincts. That vision is going to be something I'm sure Marcus Freeman preaches a lot. This is a very hard offense to contain, but I think the middle of this defense is well built for this opportunity.
I had some concerns about this linebacking core, and they've been really good. Their top 3 tacklers on this team are all linebackers. Bowen, 38 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, plus a sack, 2 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. He's been good. Kaiser, the quarterback of that defense, 34 total tackles. Osbury has been solid as well, 29 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and a pass breakup. So I think there's certainly been some strong performances from this linebacking core. Kaiser, you knew what you were going to get. You were worried about the other 2. Both of them, I think they've stood up to the test so far. Yes, they're facing a tough challenge here where they got to be a little bit better over there in the middle because this is an offense that can attack you over the middle. This is an offense that can really do a lot on the field at various different times. They're going to show you a lot, confuse you a little bit, try to throw you a couple different ways. And I think, you have to stand strong if you're Bowen and Asbury. I think that this is a big test for them to show that they've had a good season. It's not a fluke so far.
Now you look at the secondary. Again, they're probably not going to be tested too much in the past, but they've been a lot. Navy's been a lot different this year when it comes to throwing the football, so it's something you're going to have to be a little bit more aware of. Of course, Morrison going down means that there's a lot of youth at starting corner. Christian Gray, a true sophomore, and then Leonard Moore, a true freshman, stepping in. So depth isn't ideal. These guys have not played a lot of football. The experience is certainly a tad scarce, and potentially, getting fooled by some trick plays, Nick, and just coming off your man and getting beat deep, wide, downfield wide open. It's certainly a possibility in this game. They don't typically attack you with receivers on the boundary, though, Nick. It's fullbacks and tight ends getting loose downfield, and certainly that means that the corner group won't be as stressed, but I'm sure Navy's going to look to find ways to attack them in that regard. Xavier Watts, though, one of the best players in the country, 25 tackles on top of, already another 3 interceptions and 6 pass breakups. You already know he's going to be a great leader for them. Rod Hurd as well, starting to, he's been getting more snaps as the year went on after not, being fully acclimated in the off season. 2 veterans there. Those guys have played a lot of football, and I think there's more stress on the safeties and maybe even the linebackers and these outside corners. Do you think that the youth will affect them at all?
This is something where, in previous years, you could sort of rest in the secondary, not worry as much about the pass. But now this is where Navy has them right where they want them. They could surprise them and hit them with passes that they're potentially not ready for. You cannot sleepwalk in the secondary of this game because this Navy team is not your average Navy team. Watts, I've been super impressed with him. Love watching him play. You read off his stats. 3 interceptions, I think, is really impressive. Rod Hurd has been good, 22 total tackles, 2 pass breakups. Moore has stepped in, has not been bad. Solid in coverage, 20 total tackles, 2 pass breakups for him. Christian Gray's been solid as well, for 11 total tackles, a pick, and 4 pass breakups. Happy with that. Some other different players have been solid for this team as well. I like what the secondary has been able to do. They face a very intriguing challenge here. I'm not going to say a tough challenge, but I do think it's an intriguing challenge that Navy presents this week.
And, of course, another veteran in the secondary and slot, Jordan Clark. He's been tremendous as well. So I think they have enough veteran leadership back here to potentially not get hammered too hard downfield. It's really just a play-by-play basis, quite frankly, though. They're going to be disciplined. And I think the most important for them is just making tackles, especially if they get past that first line of defense. You're going to be the last guy there. You're not going to stop them if you don't bring them down. And they're going to be physical. So Notre Dame defense, I know they're looking forward to the opportunity here to make a statement against this fun offense. Moving to the Midshipmen defense, their run defense has been a bit iffy, and this is certainly going to be the toughest test they'll face all season long. When they played Memphis, a game, they allowed 274 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns in, gave up almost 200 to the UAB, 200 to Charlotte. And, of course, they're ahead big time in these games, maybe some garbage time numbers. They certainly aren't overwhelmingly dominant, I would say. Justin Reed leading the way at defensive end with 7 tackle for loss. He's a great player for them. Landon Robinson on the interior plays a lot of snaps. Kendall Whiteside, Tyler Naron as well. Griffin Willis. And, the same thing goes here, Nick. The size for the Navy defensive line is not going to be up to par with what Notre Dame's probably accustomed to seeing, facing, primarily ACC opponents. And, of course, an SEC opponent in Texas A&M. So for Navy, the one way you can offset that is just be incredibly overly aggressive and be physical. And I think that's something that they're going to bring to the table regardless of the size.
I think you have to be aggressive if you're Navy here. You got to go after the run, got to stuff the run, try to get tackles for loss as much as possible. You got to be extremely aggressive in this game. Robinson's been a really good leader for this team, really solid physical player, 29 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Reed's been great, 24 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Leads the team in both those categories. Been really impressed with him. Narin has been really solid, 11 total tackles plus a sack for him. Whiteside 8 total tackles, Willis 6 total tackles. So some good numbers, decent production here. I think this is a unit that the defensive line is not the best part of this defense. I think you're going to look at the linebacking in the secondary and see some strong pieces, but I do think Robinson and Reed are a nice duo to lead the way for this team.
In the middle of the Navy defense has 2 senior linebackers. You start with Colin Ramos, second on the team at 5.5 TFL, has 68 tackles as well, which is far and away higher than the number 2 guy, Kylo Jacob, at 45 tackles. So I think those 2 senior linebackers, they're going to have to be fully emphatic as well in terms of stepping up and making big plays. And Ryan Lane, he plays, he plays out in the box as well, but he's a versatile defensive back. He's been great in coverage, been a solid player in run stopping for them. When you look at this Navy secondary, Nick, again, they're not going to see something like this very often. When they did against Memphis, they gave up almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but they have recorded an interception in every game since week 2. 10 total interceptions. They just rattled off 4 against Charlotte. Obviously, Riley Leonard's completely better than anything Charlotte's going to be fielding out, but you play off a lot of energy in the secondary. Deshaun Peel at corner, he's leading the way. Great player. 3 picks, 3 pass breakups as well. You'll get the aforementioned Lane at safety. He's got 2 of them. This is a secondary. They're going to have a big challenge themselves, Nick, as you talk about being disciplined for Notre Dame. But in terms of athletic ability, Navy might just not have the bodies to match up with what the Irish are going to throw at them. Babidi Williams, veteran safety, he's going to have some big responsibilities, but he's kind of been, a liability in coverage for them. What do you think is going to happen here with this Navy secondary? Because I just expect them to get beat time and time again, especially on the boundary. But if you continue to play with that energy, you'll be all right.
I think it's certainly possible they can get beat on the boundary. I think, this is the key for this Navy defense is the linebackers. They got to be physical, they got to be strong, technically sound, which is what you expect out of a Navy defense. Ramos has been really good, 68 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups. Jacob's been solid, 45 total tackles, tackle for loss, interception for him. Lane, I like him in the box. I like the way you move him around. I think he's a really versatile player that's been really good for this team. 36 total tackles, 2 picks, which one of them he returned for a touchdown, 3 pass breakups for him as well. Williams has been good, 22 total tackles, 2 pass breakups, bit of a coverage liability at times. Pele has been really good for this team, 19 total tackles, 3 picks, including 2 they took to the house, 3 tackles for loss. I think this is a secondary that's not bad. Certainly they're going to be tested here. Obviously, Riley Leonard presents a unique opportunity for the Midshipmen. This is a well-disciplined, well-coached team. Not going to see a lot of penalties. Not going to see a lot of defensive pass interference. They're going to keep the play in front of them. I think they, have a tough task, and I'm certainly going to keep an eye on it because this is an opportunity where Riley Leonard can really air it out. I do think the matchup is a little more balanced than most people expect it to be, but it's certainly one you got to keep an eye on if you're looking at this game.
Now looking at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons, and usually when we do these previews, you can make a concession one way or the other. But there's a clear edge at every single position for Notre Dame. Maybe Horvath is a bit of an equalizer at quarterback, but, there's not much here you can make an argument for.
Yeah, I'm really going to only argue Horvath. I think that's the only one that I could potentially put that as even, because I think Horvath's stats speak for itself, and he's a really talented player that plays a similar style of Riley Leonard with more rushing yards this season. But, of course, Riley Leonard has a better, track record, played at a high program at Duke and Notre Dame, a really solid player coming out of high school. It's tough, right? Obviously, Navy's at a disadvantage. They're a service academy. That's what you expect. Notre Dame is one of the top programs in college football history, so obviously there's going to be a clear advantage there. Tough to make any concessions there.
Final thoughts in the prediction. Keys to the game for Notre Dame, got to play mistake-free ball. Last thing you want to do is give these guys short fields, dominate the trenches. And then for Navy, you must drain the clock, and you got to contain Riley Leonard's legs, especially on those read options. You'll run it downhill. It's going to be tough. Biggest problem for Navy here, Nick, is this is a team that, again, they have to drain the clock in a matchup like this. They're 85th in time of possession because this passing attack has been able to spark explosive plays. If they're not running, operating their full offense and they're worried, they're focused on draining more clock, that might be taking away some protection that is production in points. So it seems like Navy's just at a big disadvantage in this matchup. Any way you look at it, I think they're going to get blown out. I just don't think they'll be able to compete. I know the last game they played, they got blown out in. The one before that, they made it close, but they were down like 20-plus points in that game, made it a contest late. Irish 42-17 for me. And the things I just alluded to, Nick, makes me scared about Navy. I just think the Irish, they're going to have a good day throwing the ball, and they're going to run the ball well. They're not going to give up too many big plays against Navy's rushing attack either. Marcus Freeman will be real well prepared for this matchup. It's a great story, but the ships will go down.
I think this is a bit of a history lesson for me when you look at this matchup over the last 10 years. Notre Dame's dominated, right? They've won 9 out of 10, but 4 of those games have been one-score games, including the aforementioned game in 2022 that Notre Dame only won by 3 points. They only won by a touchdown in 17 after losing in Jacksonville, Florida by a point in 2016, while it was also close in 2014. So there have been some close games. Historically, Notre Dame dominates this rivalry 80-13, and they had that 43-year streak where they beat Navy over and over again before the famous triple overtime victory in 2007 in the crazy season where Navy finally snapped that streak before rattling off a few while Notre Dame was down and out. This is a matchup that I think is really interesting. I have Navy covering. I think Navy will be able to have some success on the ground early on before Notre Dame finally figures it out and puts this game away and wins by 10. I think this is a Navy team that's a really serious team. This is not your average Navy team. This is a team that has some energy, and we've seen them in the past go toe-to-toe with Notre Dame. Of course, they were probably a little bit worse Notre Dame teams, but this team won in 2016. They kept it close 2 years ago. I think Horvath's an absolute game changer, a key difference maker that you never really see out of a Navy offense. I don't think Notre Dame is prepared exactly for what he's going to bring to the table. I think the coaching's good, the discipline's good. You know what you're going to get out of a Navy defense. Certainly going to be a very disciplined unit. Riley Leonard could certainly have a solid day here, and I think he will. But at the end of the day, I think the Midshipmen will cover this 13.5 spread that I'm getting from the books that I'm seeing here right now. This is an intense matchup. It's going to be loud from both sides. A lot of Notre Dame fans live in the New York City area, so they'll make the travel out to the Meadowlands. I think a lot of Navy fans will show up as well. A very intriguing matchup. If Navy obviously pulls off the upset, that shakes the college football landscape. Absolute earthquake moment. I think it will be close enough, and I think they will cover the 2-touchdown spread and end up losing probably by 10, 11, 12, something like that. This is a game that will give Notre Dame fans a little bit of scare, but I think the Irish do get the job done ultimately in the end.
Bold acclamation there, scoring 28. Only one opponent has scored more than 20 points against the Irish this year, so some of the explosiveness you're hoping will carry over. MetLife Stadium, home of the 2-5 Giants. 2 good football teams throwing it down on Saturday, though. Nick, final thoughts.
Bit of a change for that stadium, finally seeing some teams with winning records showing up. Not really that often that the home team or a home team in this stadium has a winning record right now. Both teams, the Jets and Giants, are pretty bad, including my Giants, who just took an absolute beating from the Eagles on the day of recording this. I'm excited for this matchup. I like this rivalry, even though it's lopsided. It's still one of those rivalries that is part of the fabric of college football. Every year these two teams play. Yes, it's been a bit lopsided, but I think there's some energy this year that can change it up a little bit.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.